Welcome to Story Strategy Live. This is episode 45 with Dawn and Nancy, and today we'll be talking about writing authentic characters. Hello, Dawn. You're an authentic character. How are you?
I'm quite the authentic character. I'm good. I was dancing along to our music, and evidently Penny does not approve of that because she was growling at me while I was dancing.
What are you doing? This is
need
new
to
and
stop
different.
that
I don't like
right
it.
now. No one else ever needs to see that.
Well, I'm getting some flack at my house too because, as you know, our internet always sucks, and that's Charlie's fault. But today it went down when Dawn and I were preparing to go live, and so I ran down and reset the router. Which, if you have teenagers playing video games, evidently makes them die.
For them.
I did give them like 30 seconds warning to save a game, and he was like, "I'm playing with other people. I can't save." So now I'm in trouble. Oh well.
We'll keep you here with us for a little bit, and that'll keep you from having to face that wrath.
Not that worried about my 13-year-old's wrath, frankly, but don't tell him that. Anyway.
Grumpy. They're just so
no, he's always grumpy. Yeah, very volatile. Like the mood's changing. It's worse than menopause, man. Not that I would know. Okay, so I would know.
Yeah. Okay. So anyway, hi Kate. Thanks for joining us.
I do see Kate.
I do see Kate.
All right. All right. What are we doing today, Dawn?
We are talking, March is all about angst. And today we are talking about authentic characters and where their angst comes from and how to display their angst without making them look paper-ish. I don't know. I should have had a better word.
Two-dimensional, I guess.
Two-dimensional, yes. That would be the word.
Paper-ish. That works.
Paper. They're flat.
Yes, I got what you meant.
I was at the DMV for 2 hours today. It's just been a long day, and I'm really sorry that my brain is not going to function.
Oh, no.
At all.
Hi, Amanda.
Now.
We see you. Thanks for hanging out.
Hi, Amanda.
And so we have learned recently that a lot of people actually do listen to this like as a podcast, which is terrifying to me because we really don't go back in and like carefully edit everything so that it works in a podcast format. We just put it up there. So
this
hello
is us.
to those. Yeah, sorry. And thank you. But that's exciting. Anyway, the DMV is not exciting.
Yes. I was a little concerned because, speaking of characters, I'm totally going to tie this in. Speaking of characters, being the writer and that I'm a super people watcher. And so we were sitting there and we had an appointment. They don't do just walk-ins anymore, but you still have to end up sitting there forever. And so we were sitting there and I'm like checking out everybody, making up stories for everybody. And I was a little concerned about the guy behind me who was talking about how he had just passed the CDL, the written part of the CDL test by 1 point.
Okay.
And then talking about how he only passed the school bus driving part of it by 1 point.
He's going to be driving people's children around in a bus.
And I was like, okay, dude, first of all, you're saying this loud enough. Everybody can hear you. Everybody. And you may be very good at what you're planning on doing, but I don't have a lot of faith in you right now.
Sound like he's really good at it.
Yeah. So we had him behind us, and then we had an older couple that they just moved to Texas. They just got here and they're living with their son, but they're in a completely smart house. They don't know how to work all the stuff. They have to make sure that he doesn't set the alarm because they don't know how to turn it off. And they're announcing this. They're talking to the little lady who's like, really, I just need your proof of residency.
I don't care.
And then when I realized why we were going to be there for so long was when the wife whips out her phone and starts showing her Instagram pictures of because the lady who was doing the just show me your residency thing had red hair, only it was really short. And the wife whipped out her Instagram pictures, and it's like, this is our son. If you just grew your hair out just a little bit, you could look just like him. And we got two redheaded grandchildren. And what, do you have any children? Oh, well, do they have red hair? Well, it can skip generations. And the lady was being so kind to them. She was being so sweet. But I know she is looking at this waiting room full of people and being like, I don't have time to look at your Instagram pictures.
Seriously. Wow. But good
Yes.
for grandma being on Instagram. I mean,
yeah. So that's been my days.
That sounds painful.
Evident Ink is on Instagram.
I know, because you put us there.
Yes.
So is Delancey Stewart, but that's because my PA puts us there.
Yeah, so we are there. So that's been my day. So I'm not responsible for anything that comes out of my mouth at this point, because the filter that's usually very thin anyway, that's between my brain and my mouth, is like, we're tired. That was a long 2 hours. That was a life-sucking 2 hours.
That will take it right out of you. Yeah.
It will.
Well, I've had a rejuvenating day because both my children went to school today. To school.
Oh, nice.
Physically out of the house.
Are they out for spring break next week though?
Yeah, they are.
Just checking.
Yes. But
just thought I'd ask.
There is a light at the end of that tunnel, because when spring break ends, they both go back 100% in person full time.
Nice.
Yeah. And my husband has finally decided that he's going to work from the office most of the time. So I have had a couple days where the house is actually quiet and there's nobody here except for me and Charlie Taco, my dog.
That's nice. I don't remember what those days are like.
I didn't either until very recently. Yeah. That was why I scheduled this hotel weekend. I'm going to go, like, sometimes if I have a lot of work to get done and I just can't at home, I will go to a local hotel and just hole up. And so I planned that, because life was so crazy for the last few months, I couldn't get a moment to even think. But now, since they've been leaving me, I feel better. Like, I don't need the hotel weekend as much. Plus, we're going to get 1 million feet of snow. But my husband is like, just go binge watch a show when, like, in a place where nobody's going to bother you or ask to eat your Chex Mix. I'm like, okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Take him up on that. Go get yourself snowed in, take a break. It'll be awesome. So
yes, I'm a worrier. It's hard for me to enjoy stuff, even when I know I should. But all right. Well, so that's my character. Is that a good segue?
Characters. Yes, we are awesome at this. We're talking about what makes characters authentic. And we've kind of covered this a couple of times. We've covered like character of emotion. We've covered character wounds. And now we're going to kind of mesh it together of how do you blend all of that to make your characters feel authentic, to where they feel like a fully formed human, that the person down the street, they feel like your neighbor. They feel like somebody you'd want to go have a drink with. There's somebody you want to spend 3 or 4 hours with, which is what most readers to do. So we're going to talk about, how do you do that?
Yes. How do you do that? Well, so I think...
Well, we're going to start. Go ahead.
Well, so it's kind of funny because, I'm not going to get political here, but one of the things that I always say whenever there's a new candidate up for anything is like, would I want to go have a beer with him? Like, I don't know if I'd want to go sit at a bar and have a conversation with him. And that's a stupid way to pick your president, I realize, but it is sort of the way that I look at characters too. When I'm reading, like, I don't really want to spend 4 hours reading about somebody who I wouldn't want to sit down and have a conversation with. So that's like my, what do you call it? Yardstick, I guess. And the key there is not like, do you want to go have a beer with them? Is this character relatable? Is this character someone that I could see fitting into my world that I would be interested enough in learning more about to sit down and talk to?
Right. It's not, they don't have to be likable. And I think that is a mistake that a lot of new authors get caught up in, is your character, I don't have to like them. Now, if you're writing romance and I need to like the heroine enough to make sure she wants to get with the guy, or the love interest, whatever, it doesn't have to be a guy, and I need to like the love interest enough to root for them to be together. I don't want to be, pulling the love interest aside and being like, no, come over here. Don't, stay away from that. So, but you don't have to like them, especially in suspense or mystery. You don't necessarily have to like the characters, but you have to be able to relate, and you have to be able to understand why they're doing what they're doing.
Right. Yeah, I think that motivation piece is really important. We've talked about that a lot with villains, especially, and that's a good example of not having to like the character, but you still have to understand not that they are acting the way you would act, but you have to understand why they are acting a certain way.
Right. And that goes back to the repeated advice that the villain is the hero of their own story. And so we've got to be able to see being evil just for the sake of being evil very rarely works.
Right. There's some motivation.
Yes. And the whole, especially, and I get very frustrated with this because I taught high school for so long, the whole idea of the mean girl and the kids getting bullied the first day just because they're a new kid. And there's a motivation behind that. Right. And I am absolutely, yes, kids do get bullied. Absolutely. It is a problem. But it's not what you see in the films of like John Hughes films of, well, you're the new kid. I'm going to randomly knock your books out of your hand and squash your glasses. Because most of the time, the new kid's not even going to be on the mean girl or the mean guy's radar until they do something.
Right.
And so you've got to have that motivation there. And you've got to have the reactions. And that's, I know that all of my clients will be shocked that I am talking about reactions.
If you've ever had a manuscript returned from Dawn, she actually has a macro that she can just hit a couple buttons and it will pop up the little comment, thoughts, feelings, emotions.
Yes, because they have to be there. That's how you get into deep POV.
Stuff can't just happen. Your characters have to react constantly.
Yes. And I figure if I put that in enough, eventually the authors will put in a couple of more and it'll improve from where they started. So they've got to have those reactions, and those reactions have to be reasonable for that character based on their background, the situation they're in, their experiences, and the wounds and the ghost. And Amanda just put #truth in the comments because
she knows what I'm talking about.
She knows. So yes.
All right. Well, so the reactions have to be reasonable. Let's talk about the wound, because the way that they react is going to be based on their perspective. I was just talking to a coaching client yesterday about this, because we were talking about kind of like, okay, the two characters, it's a romance, are going to go through the getting to know each other, getting to like each other again. But it's a second chance romance, and they broke up badly once before. And it was kind of like he did something, he never really explained it to her. And so in her mind, like he did this horrible thing. He never explained it. He's a bad person. She's super, super angry. And so as they get back together, we were talking about how they both are going to react to having this final conversation that explains what happened before. And I was like, but remember, they're not going to, just because he can have an open conversation about it because he knows all the info, doesn't mean that she will be able to respond as a rational, mature adult, because she's so angry. That was her wound, this thing that he did to her. So you have to think about, people come into every situation in their lives carrying all the baggage that they've accumulated throughout the journey. And if there's something really bad, and that's what the wound is, that thing that colors everything else, then every reaction that they make is going to be based on, they're looking through this lens of the wound, right?
Right. And you can have two characters with the exact same wound. The exact same thing could have happened to two characters, and they're going to react differently. Right. Just like people in real life react differently to the situations. And the example is, it's a meme going around on Facebook right now. I think that it's, if you look at two sons of an alcoholic father, and one of the sons never touches alcohol, has stayed far away from it, and you ask him why he acts like that, he says, I learned from watching my father. And then you've got the other son who is an alcoholic and is having to struggle with that. And when you ask him why he acts like that, his answer is, I learned from watching my father. Mm-hmm. So you can have two characters, and your characters should react very differently, because that's real life. And their reactions are not necessarily going to match yours as the author. The way the character responds to something may be completely different from the way you would respond.
Right. And that's the joy of writing, is you get to explore being lots of different people.
Yes. And showing their reactions and their thoughts and their emotions. You get to be in their mind and show the reader what that's like.
Yes. Okay. So the wound has to influence the way that they react to things. But it's got to be, I mean, we talked about wounds last week, so I don't think we have to really dwell on this too much, but it has to be something big enough that it would actually impact the way they react to everything. So something like, you know, I broke my toe when I was 4 because my brother pushed me off a swing. Therefore, I don't speak to my brother. Like, no. And I will never speak to any brothers ever. Like, no, probably not. That's a really stupid example, but
you need the Goldilocks thing. You need the reaction to not be so incredibly over the top. And we see this a lot, especially in romance, of you see the person that, and it can work, and I'll give an example of when it can work in just a second, but you see the person that they went through a really bad breakup, like in high school. And it's, well, I'm never going to have a relationship ever again. I'm never going to let anybody ever get that close to me again. That's an over-the-top reaction, because do you still have friends? Do you still talk to new people? Or, you know, and so the balance of that would be, I'm going to have relationships, but here's the line that I'm not going to cross. This is where I'm not. And that's where that internal conflict comes in. The internal conflict is the character's line in the sand. And it's the, you know, yes, I went through this really bad breakup in high school. My girlfriend cheated on me and stood up in front of everybody at prom and announced that she had cheated on me and rode off into the sunset with the prom king. And so I'm not going to have those types of relationships where I'm going to tell a girl I love her and pour out my entire heart, but I will have relationships that will go up to this point.
Right.
And that's where your Goldilocks, that's where you're not too hot, not too cold. That's what you're looking for with these characters.
Just right.
Right. Yes, right in the middle. Well, and I have to point out, I know y'all make fun of me for demanding more reactions, and that's fine. I am very comfortable with that part of myself. I understand. I'm good with that. But it's because I have seen, and I have authors who will not mind me pointing this out. I wouldn't point this out if I was going to embarrass them. But for example, I have an author she's writing a fantasy. And so there's magic involved, and there's it's set in a completely different world than ours. But this character who is not familiar with all of that walked into a room that was supposed to be empty, and there is a random old woman sitting there knitting, in like a rocking chair. And in the first version of the story, he was like, "Oh, hello," and I'm like, No, he thought this room was completely empty. He is not going to walk in there and randomly be like, "Oh, hi, strange woman who shouldn't be in this room because it's been abandoned for 50 years. And where did you come from?" So that's where you've got to have those kind of reactions to guide your reader. So that's what you're looking for, is let the reader know, is this something they are really upset about? Is this a big reaction? Is this a medium reaction? Or is this just a little reaction? And that's how it builds that character and guides the reader through the rest of the story.
Right. So we just got a comment pop up. I'm not quite sure what's going on here. It says, "I need serious writing advice. I'm making a story, but then I realized I'm writing power fantasy." Oh, this does happen where you're writing one thing, or you think you're writing one thing, but then it turns out you're writing something else. The story is about an insanely jacked guy in a sci-fi setting, brutally murdering enemies. And later on in the story becomes the most powerful being in the universe. Even one of my antagonists is based on a bully I once had help. So everyone is uber powerful. Is that the problem? Or I guess we would need more information. But there's lots of ways to get in touch with us. So you can go to our website and send in a form to contact us, or you can contact us through our Facebook page. and we will always respond. So if you
Yes.
have some questions, maybe we need to feel out a little bit more what you're looking for there. So I have lost my train of thought. Done.
Well, and we were talking about their wound and their wound connecting to making them authentic. And part of that is also with the finding your Goldilocks spot is the aware of making them too self-aware.
Oh,
and we've talked about that repeatedly, but that's something that as a issue we see repeatedly of be aware that this character probably is not thinking to themselves, I cannot get involved with anybody because my girlfriend in high school dumped me for the prom king.
Or even not to go that far, but most real people also don't think like, well, I'm going to get into this relationship, but I'm only going to allow it to go this far because that's when I usually put up a wall. Most people don't know that they do that.
They don't realize that until they're doing
having a relationship. As far as they're concerned, they're 100% in it, but it never seems to work out and they're not sure why. And it's because of that. But if they're aware of that, then that would be the first step to get closer to stop doing that. And that's what you have to do as the writer. They're not going to do it themselves because they're just a character. Real people, perhaps, but that's what therapists are for.
Well, and okay, so when we're looking at making authentic characters, moving away from the wound a little bit, you've got to look at consistent characterization.
So and they do, you mean in one character, doing things that are consistent to the way you've made your character? Okay.
Yes. So if you have set up a character who, and we talked about this a little bit during the show when we were talking about love scenes, if you've set up a character who has never worked out and is not an overly physical type character, they're probably not going to pick up their partner and carry them around the house during the love scene. And that's a very little thing, but that's also something that feeds into the character being authentic. And so where you also have to look at this, and this comes up a lot in mysteries and suspense, is does the character have the background experience to be doing what they're doing? Like if it's an amateur sleuth, do they have any idea how to hotwire a car? Which I don't even know if you can still do that. But why did they know how to hotwire a car? Why would they know how to break into a house? Like if somebody took me and was like, hey, you need to pick this lock, I would be like, okay. Do you have a bobby pin? I think it requires one of those. I've seen
that. Or
is
it a credit card? I don't know.
Yeah. So you need to set it up. And what I love is when I can see with my authors of when they run into something like that. And for example, they're in a situation where they need to hotwire a car and it'll be like, Nancy jumped behind the wheel and suddenly started sparking the wires together and remembered from the time she dated that guy who liked to steal cars a lot, and so they just throw it in there.
Trying to explain it away.
Right. Hand waves, pay no attention to what's going on. But that's part of making your character authentic is how are they going to respond based on their reaction or based on their experience and their background?
Right.
How does that lead into what they're doing now?
Yes, good point. So let's see. Dialogue and internal thoughts. We've kind of went there with your thoughts, emotions, feelings. But I think the dialogue can add a lot to making a character authentic because, and this is something else that I think sometimes people go either too far to one side or the other. You want to make sure that all of your characters have a fairly, what's the word? What am I looking for? Specific way of talking that's specific to them. Which is not to say distinctive. That's what I'm looking for. Which is not to say that they aren't similar, because if your characters are all coming from the same town or a similar background, or certain socioeconomic community, they may all speak similarly. But you want to make something distinctive so that we always know if, like one character might say, "Hey, you," every time she runs into people. Don't make all your characters say, "Hey, you," every time they run into people, as Delancey did in her last book. And the other thing that we see sometimes is going too far with that, where maybe they all live in a tiny town in southern Louisiana down by the Gulf, and they all have crazy, Cajun accents, and you're going to write that dialect authentically by, shortening all the words and smushing them together and doing whatever you have to do. That is super annoying to read, so don't do that. Hint at it and then let it go. And B, not every character, like we won't be able to tell them apart if they all are using this crazy thick accent, right? So maybe one word, one of them always says a certain way. Mm-hmm. But so you can use language, the way that they talk to each other, the way they respond in conversation. Maybe, I think it must have been a book I was editing. One character always, instead of asking questions, basically makes a statement that is a question. Like the other character always knows that she's being asked a question, even though he's just saying something. And that's like what makes his dialogue specific to him. So you can come up with stuff like that. I wouldn't rack your brain too much or try to make it too off the wall, because that will lend itself to feeling inauthentic. But most people do have certain verbal tics that we use.
And just think about people that you know. If you're trying to figure out what exactly we mean by that, think about if you are thinking about your partner, or if you're thinking about your grandmother or whatever, think about what phrases did they use? And how would I know if I saw something typed out that was a transcript of them speaking with no name on it, how would I know that was them versus somebody else?
Right.
And where that really comes into play is if you are doing a first person POV, if you're doing alternating POVs, to where normally the character's name is at the beginning of each chapter, so you know whose POV you're in. Where that comes into play is I should be able to walk away from that book in the middle of that chapter, go cook dinner, come back, and when I pick it up in the middle of the chapter, even though that name isn't there anymore, I should be able to know from their dialogue and their thoughts and all of the things about them, which character's POV I'm in.
Yes.
Without having to stop and flip back.
Yeah. So it can get heavy-handed. It's kind of a finesse thing, I think. But you start to get a feeling for it, I think, if you are writing dual POV. I don't know. I've heard of things like people wearing a hat when they write the male POV and silly things like that help them like get into that character more. I don't do anything like that. Maybe I should try it.
We totally need you to wear a hat during one of these shows. You can switch POVs on us while you're...
Knowing me, it'll be like whenever I write the male character, I'll drink scotch, and then the male character's POV will be all screwed up. Nobody will understand any of it because it'll be like, oh, she was drinking scotch.
And now we know. Now you know Nancy's writing secrets.
What did Hemingway say? Write drunk, edit sober.
Yes.
I find it's better to write sober as well.
Generally. Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about what makes characters feel inauthentic.
Well, I talked a little bit about how you can do that in dialogue by using too much dialect and stuff.
Right. I think generic responses and generic things like, I was angry. Okay, well, how does being angry feel to that person? And what do they do when they're angry? Because, for example, those of you who know me, I talk all the time. I am outgoing. I talk all the time until I get really upset. And then I get really, really quiet.
That's good to know.
Because normally I'm trying to control whatever's going to come out of my mouth. And then things do start coming out of my mouth and it's normally not good. So you got to look at how does your character respond in that situation? Are they the type who's going to come in guns a-blazing, yelling at everybody? Or are they the type who suddenly get quiet and everybody's like, oh, we have a problem now?
Right. Well, and so as you're thinking through the personalities, like what if to kind of figure out in your head, how does your hero react if he's really, really upset about something? How does he react if he's angry? Like Don said, how does he react if he's super happy? And thinking about the way you want this person in your head to react will help you kind of figure out what kind of person they are. Like if he's the kind of guy that like gives everybody a giant bear hug and jumps up and down when he's happy, he's probably not the kind of guy who, when he's angry, is going to unleash on somebody with no real provocation. So you can kind of start to find your path toward authentic reaction by figuring that stuff out.
Well, and if we take this all the way back to the wound, because that's where it all goes back to, again, the reactions are going to be based on that too. Of whenever somebody starts pushing that wound, how do they respond?
Yeah.
Because if you look at, for example, in the movie Hope Floats, the Sandra Bullock's character, whose name I can't remember all the time.
I've never seen that movie. Sorry.
I don't even know you. I don't even know you. Anyway, there's a moment where Sandra Bullock's character is having a fight with her mom. And her mom starts talking about how, well, you were always the one trying to be fancier than everybody else. You were always the one trying to be, the pleasing one. And Sandra Bullock's answer is, I had to be pleasing because you were the town joke. And so that goes back to the character's wound of when she starts getting that button pushed, it triggers that reaction from her because that's what she knows works. And so you can kind of intermingle those of maybe this person is always very vivacious and very outgoing, except for whenever you hit whatever is their problem. And suddenly they're having to deal with real feelings, and then that their demeanor changes, and the way they're interacting with people changes. And so you can tie those all together.
Well, and when you say it like that, I get this and I think I do this with my own characters. I get this aha kind of feeling, because if you're just coming up with and he'll probably do this when he's mad, and he'll probably do this when he's sad, but you're not tying it back to some reason, it feels arbitrary. But if you can say, well, he would probably do that because, and then think about how it relates to the wound, like Dawn was just talking about, all of a sudden I get this yeah, that makes sense. Yay.
Good. I love it when I make sense. I love it. And going with this, it's kind of interesting. I see this a lot in the first drafts. Where the author hasn't layered in yet the buildup to some of the reactions, because you'll have something happening and it seems pretty normal. And then all of a sudden you've got a character screaming, or you've got a character bursting into tears. And it's like, okay, wait a minute. I don't know where that came from.
This seems not right.
Yeah, that seems... And now, don't get me wrong, I've dealt with teenagers for a lot of years, so I know that is an option at any moment. But generally, if you're in that character's POV, we're going to see that building up. Now, you can have, and it can be kind of entertaining if you are in an opposite character's POV and they think everything's fine, and then all of a sudden, oh, they're crying. This is a problem.
Well, that characterizes the POV character. Evidently this person is completely oblivious in general to other people's feelings, and that's part of his character.
Yes.
Charming.
So those are some of the things that can make him feel inauthentic. And then we have to address, two things. One, out of character actions or reactions for the purpose of the plot.
Yes. You can't just make
a character
happen because they have to. You have to have a reason.
A character can't just do something because, well, that makes sense for this moment, and I really need them to do that. So we're just gonna hand wave. That doesn't work, especially when you have an editor who's like, they need motivation. And this comes up. I see this a lot in suspense. Of this character has been super overprotective and has done everything they can to keep this other person safe from whatever big bad danger is out there. And it's time for the big bad danger to come kidnap them. And so the super overprotective character, either one gets mad and is suddenly like, I'm not going to protect you anymore, which I have issues with that. Or two, does something completely okay, well, you stay here and I'm going to go back to my own house and take a nap for a little while.
Like the entire last half of Lock and Key.
Yes.
That show.
Yeah, the entire thing of we're not going to pay any attention to where our 8-year-old child is in the dark.
Yeah,
I have issues with that. So you cannot just have a character do something for the to facilitate the plot. Whatever they're doing has to have some kind of motivation.
Yes, and so like every horror movie ever made, where the lady goes up the stairs because she knows there's a killer up there. Like, what? Or whatever.
Yeah, no. Go out the front door with your cell phone in your hand.
Yeah. No, you guys all know because I think we always use that one. And that falls into the category too stupid to live. And when you get there, that's when people close the book and walk away and may say, I will never buy a such and such book again. And then you're blacklisted.
You want to avoid that.
You don't want that.
Yeah.
Because you might write a better book next time.
Too stupid to live characters. The one that I see a lot, again, because mystery and suspense, is in romantic suspense where you have a woman who is clearly in danger. Like they've taken shots at her car, or somebody left a bomb on her front porch. And then she's like, no, I don't want protection because I'm not going to let my independence be limited by no, protect me. Protect me.
Or there are 90 examples of how someone's out to kill her. And she's like, I'm just going to run by my apartment and pick up my spare keys because we really need them. It'll just take me 5 minutes. No worries. And clearly, no. Okay.
Well, or if this is one of my other favorites, because we have established I am a big fat chicken, and I'm very okay with that part of me.
She also is afraid of ostriches, just FYI.
Yes, terrified of birds. But if I am with big burly guy and he is protecting me, and he looks at me and says, Dawn, you need to stay in this closet, and I'm going to shut the door, and bad guy's not going to know you're in there, and I'm going to go, take care of bad guy. I'm going to be like, you want me to hang like a monkey from the bar up there? You want me to try to curl up on the shelf? What do you want me to do? I am not going to get into the closet and be like, I should go help him.
Oh, God. I have a shoe.
Right, exactly. I'm coming out of the closet right now to go save the, military guy. And again, that's kind of a crisscross between, okay, well, I need her not to be over here because she's got to put herself in danger so he can save her. And the character has a brain. And I know that's a really weird thing to say because it's the author's brain, but the character has a brain, and you've got to keep those decisions consistent. And if you have a character who is consistently making decisions that don't make any sense to the reader, yes, they get labeled too stupid to live, which is kind of a harsh label in my opinion, but they get labeled too stupid to live. And then your readers are like, yeah, I don't like her. And that's when you see things in the reviews like, I didn't like this character. This character didn't make any sense to me.
Not believable.
And that's what you want to avoid.
Yeah. Well, so I had one little quick thing to show before we're done, which may or may not be helpful. And I'll be honest that I do not use these, but I bought them thinking that I would. The Archetype Cards, I think I've actually shown these once before. If you are stuck trying to create characters, these are by Carolyn Miss, M-Y-S-S, not sure. It's basically a gigantic stack of cards. They're not tarot cards. They kind of look like them. But each one has an archetype: prostitute, saboteur, victim, child, addict, all the way through the alphabet. And it gives you attributes of each character. So these aren't meant to be stereotypes. Like prostitute is not actually prostitute. It's a personality trait. And in fact, she says that all of us have either victim, child, prostitute, or saboteur in our personality makeup. But there's a light attribute and a shadow attribute. So you can read these and kind of figure out different aspects of a character. So for instance, the light attribute says accentuates the challenge of surviving without negotiating the power of your spirit. So that's like a positive thing about a prostitute. And if you think about someone prostituting themselves, they are basically saying, like, I'm going to do what I have to do to survive, but I'm going to protect myself in the meantime. And then the shadow attribute of the prostitute says places material considerations and security above self-empowerment. So that makes sense too. So you can, they're a little woo-woo, but they're good for spawning ideas. And I think importantly, I'm going to link an article. Archetypes and stereotypes are not the same thing. And you need to be careful about creating those two-dimensional characters we were talking about earlier. You know, he's a jock. Okay, but he's a whole lot more than that. Like, you got to figure out all that other stuff. So these are interesting if you're stuck.
Well, and part of our giveaway this week or this month for the newsletter, is about creating character arcs.
The KM Wieland?
Sure.
Isn't
However you want to. I don't know how to say it.
Oh, okay. I
would say it Wayland.
Wayland. I don't know. Anyway, good book. We'll give it away. And on that note, if you are watching, I dare you to pull somebody else next time. Bring a friend. Share the link. Let other writers that you know that we're talking about writerly things. Of course, next week we're on spring break. So next week's not a good one to share because we won't be here.
We won't be here.
It'll be real quiet. But if you do that and you put a note to me or Dawn on Facebook, you can either leave a note on the page or just send us a message. Let us know who you shared with. And if that person does actually show up, I will have a special little prize for you. So I dare you. And we will have a newsletter actually coming out. I plan to get it done this weekend during my hotel weekend. So that should be good. And what else have we got going on? We already said next week is spring break. We do.
Yeah, next week. Oh, I've got news.
What's your news?
My news is that, okay, so next week's spring break, we're not going to be here. That's okay. The week after that, which is March 25th, we are going to have Ronnie Loren as a guest talking about all of the angst. And if you read any of Ronnie's books, there is so much angst and wounds and tragic. You just want to hug these poor people backstories. And she's going to talk to us about how to create those.
Cool. Okay. I guess I better get the internet fixed before then. You're very forgiving. We can't have guests dealing with my internet.
We have to clean up for company. Yes. But we also have our classes. My Deep POV classes on there. Story Fuel's on there. Your romance writing classes on there. We have another one coming soon.
We do. It's all plotted out. I just haven't gotten it actually made. So in the future, I'm not promising a date just yet.
We have good things coming.
We do.
I think that is it. Go ahead.
That was it. I was just going to say thank you for joining us. And as always, it was fun seeing you, Dawn, and seeing you guys out there. Feel free to get in touch. And you know where to find us.
Have a great spring break.
Yes. Enjoy spring break. I hope it doesn't snow where you are.
It won't